students are joining in real quick, what we'll do is we do have a couple of logistics slides. I think Amna has those slides.
Okay, hopefully it'll work. I have my presentation there, and I should just be able to hit share screen.
Right, so what she's gonna do is I have a couple logistics slides for the class. Then Amna, she's gonna introduce Orla, who can then just do a hot word, and then the floor is yours. And this is our first discussion to be open-ended and exciting, and I'm glad to see a lot of students joining in. But again, and this will be recorded. As you can see, it's being recorded. But the purpose is also to give students from the many universities in many different areas a chance to talk, and they do have projects assigned. So some students were assigned to this particular session, which is SDG 12, led by Amna. We have a water talk next week, so that just so you have an idea that that's what's going on with all the students. I see Andrew is online, so welcome to Andrew.
Hello, hello.
If you get,
hi Orla.
How you doing?
Whoops.
Yeah, good, good. Sorry, Gillian.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you want to turn your screen on for a second and give Jeanne a wave, so she can see.
I'll
your lovely mug. I think Amna will have. There we go.
It's dark here. So,
yeah.
Hello.
Nice to meet you, Andrew.
I'm still looking good, Andrew. You're still looking good.
Oh gosh.
Dignity, you know.
Thank you.
So it's good. We need the male universe represented here. So.
Yeah, I feel like that sometimes, but that's okay. Jack's here. He's a fellow student at Derby, so.
Good.
So Andrew, we were just sort of getting introduced, and again, the SDG team will be leading the floor today. That's the SDG 12 team. So they will be the team in charge today as students start joining in. I see. I'm not sure if Sarah Green is actually on, or is that Amna's logged in as Sarah?
Sarah Whipple.
That should be her if she's here.
Oh, so Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? So I'm asking the faculty to introduce themselves.
Sarah Whipple? You talking to Sarah Whipple?
Well, you can introduce yourself too. She's the lead. Well, I don't know. She's technically a TA, but she's in charge. And Jeanne, you've met Sarah.
Yes, I have met Sarah before. I've been with Sarah.
So Sarah G, are you on?
She might be driving actually.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, he's there.
I'm here.
Oh.
I just got on. So I don't know what you were asking me, if you were asking me something.
I'm just watching all the
if you want to turn your video on and introduce yourself quickly to the speakers.
Let's see, video. I'm on a phone, so it's not going to show up very well. Hi.
Oh.
I'll get out of the light here. Let me try this. Here we go. I'm in a hotel room. I'm Sarah Green. I'm at Michigan Tech University. I'm an environmental chemist. And I don't know what else you want to know. I'm following the lead of my co-conspirator, Gillian, to get this thing going here.
Oh, I like that, co-conspirators. I think we can get into lots of trouble as co-conspirators.
Yeah.
So thank you, Sarah. If you want to turn your videos off.
Will do.
And most of us do keep our videos off because of the large bandwidth seem to require, but we'll do a wave at one point to everyone.
Okay, and I'll turn my video off as well then too.
If that helps with your bandwidth, sometimes that does help with the larger classes. We'll have people turning it on and off, and that keeps things a little smoother as students are joining up. I'm not seeing, trying to keep in, Sarah G can help me out. Another professor or faculty has joined in. One problem is that everything's flashing as people join in. So we'll give ourselves another second. Amna, if you want to, do you want me to share my screen for the first logistics and then you'll go next?
Yes, if you want to, or I can just share everything. I do have your slides too.
Okay, and I think then Jeanne was going to control her slide. So I'll let you start sharing your screens as everybody gets on board. There we go.
I hate that picture. That's not a good picture. Why did you put that picture up there? Terrible. I hate
That was one of our birthdays.
No, that was back in the bad days for me. So.
Oh dear, that was
you'll hear
Hawaii.
about that. You'll understand why I hate that picture soon.
There will be a quiz on that picture later. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, being mindful of time since we have 2 guest speakers on. And as we see other faculty join, we may ask them to quickly introduce themselves. So let's go on to the next slide, and we're really excited to welcome our guest speakers that are being hosted by SDG team number 12 with Amna in the lead. But I did want to do a couple of logistics and just remind us of a bit of history really quickly, in part because this month, 2 years ago, the IPCC did release the 1.5 report. And again, I've put a lot of information in these slides because these slides are also available and are recorded for other times, so you can refer back. But what's most important is that when the 1.5 report came out, the question was, can we achieve 1.5 versus 2-degree warming? And what happens if we don't achieve that measure? So it's important as students that we all recognize that the 2 degrees came simply by an argument with the Prime Minister of Denmark, who did not appreciate scientists giving him long scenarios. So he said, well, I need a number. You need to tell me a number that we can work against as politicians. And that number actually was negotiated with President Obama and others. And that's where the 2 degrees comes from, is of all the climate scenarios, which one is one that we are targeting. And then when the Paris Agreement came forward, a lot of the data shows that at 2 degrees to 1.5 made a huge difference. Let's go on to the next slide. And what that difference is interesting, and why I wanted to highlight it, again, because this report came out 2 years ago this month, but also today in the news, one of the predictions from the 1.5 degree report is happening, and that is the Category 4 storm Delta, which is in the Gulf of Mexico right now. It's been a little bit swallowed with all the other news going on with the US elections, but this is a major storm. It is predicted to hit the coast of the US as a Category 4. So it's actually quite high. And if you see from the 1.5 report, these types of extreme events is exactly what they're predicting would occur as the climate continues to warm and change. But the important thing is we think about, again, as we move forward with sustainability and sustainable business, sustainable livelihoods, production and consumption, is that 1.5 report highlights that difference between 2 degrees warming and 1.5 degree warming was the difference of the existence of some countries. Tuvalu, Marshall Islands are predicted to go completely underwater given the 2 degree warming. So it just gives us a little bit of perspective to think about. Next slide. So logistics, just a quick reminder before we turn it over to our guest speakers. Be sure you check in with your guest leads. At the end of this talk with our guest speakers, we will go back into breakout rooms. So if you're not yet assigned to a breakout room for some of the University of Derby students, do put your email in a chat box to Sarah Whipple, so she can add you to a team. And you can do that as a chat on the side so we don't need to interrupt our speakers. Thirdly, we have set on the date for the global conference, and that will be on December 9th. That will be our final dates for all the things to be presented. That includes your press conferences, your final posters, and your presentations. Your Yay Fellows will fill you in on how those will work. But those products will be uploaded in November. So we just need to be mindful that we've got a month and a half to get these projects together and off the ground. Next slide. So our guest introduction with a lot of complaining because she doesn't like this picture.
That one I like. That was in Alaska.
No, this is Hawaii. Hawaii.
Oh, Hawaii. We've been so many places, you know.
I know, too many adventures. No, we were cold in Alaska. So
yeah,
this is Hawaii. So as you can all hear for all the students, Jeannie and I have known each other for an extremely long time. We played on the Northwestern's women's soccer team. Jeannie was our goalie. I was our forward, and my entire job was just to run the defense ragged because I was a lousy shot, but that's another whole story. We also have our discussant who can turn her video on as well as Dr. Orla Kelleher from University of Derby, also from the School of Business. So it's great that we have two business people talking to us today about sustainable business. Questions will be posted in the chat box, but the students from SDG 12, thank you very much, have already submitted their questions, and Jeannie has those incorporated in her slides. There, she got them. So before I turn it over to Amna for the next slide, I'm just going to ask real quickly, I'm going to stop sharing our screen and ask Pam Templar, who's online. Pam, can you introduce yourself real quickly to our guest speaker?
Sure. Hi, Jean. I'm Pam Templar. I'm in the Department of Biology at Boston University. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right, I don't see any other faculty. Did I miss any faculty? Hearing no objections, as they say in the UN world. Amna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Bowser. So before we begin, I will quickly try to introduce both our guests today and put their life's accomplishments in less than 2 minutes. To begin with, Jeanne, she is a chemical engineer by training, and now she is the president and CEO of Delphin Industries, which is a materials manufacturing company that provides materials to the semiconductor, aerospace, and medical industries via its many subdivisions. So she has been awarded many awards, some of which I have listed here, and that includes the Diamond Leadership Award and the Most Influential Women in Business in Silicon Valley Award. And that list is actually very, very, very long. So just to move on to her business itself, that has also been named the top women-owned business in the Bay Area by the San Francisco Times. Other than running a business, which is Delphin, she is also very passionate about women empowerment, and she particularly has been working for promoting women engagement in science through her family and the Delphin Foundations. So moving on to our facilitator, and that was fast, I know, I'm sorry. So moving on to our facilitator and discussant for today, Orla Kelleher, who also has an amazing record of being involved in the advocacy of sustainable and ethical business management. And she is a marine biologist and environmental scientist by training. So currently, Orla is a senior lecturer of sustainable business management at the College of Business, Law, and Social Sciences at the University of Derby. In the past, she also owned her own business, which was core focused in Dublin. And other than that, she has been actively engaged in the past with the Irish government for policy development. And she has also represented Ireland at the United Nations in the role of a scientific advisor. So we will today have a good perspective on not only how to establish and run a business, but also how to run it ethically and sustainably. And which is why SDG 12 team is hosting Orla and Jeanne today, because we are working as a team on the responsible production and consumption in businesses. So with that, I will give the floor to Jeanne, if you want to share your slides.
Okay, we're gonna see how this works. I'm saying share, but it's not doing this. Let's see. Okay, there we go. And slideshow. I have to from the beginning. Oh wait, it won't let me. Well, I think it can let me do this. Okay, here we go. View. There we go. Slideshow from beginning. All right, now we got it. Wasn't that far off as we go. And I think, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm actually going to give you a little bit more overview about sort of my journey, which has had its ups and downs, which I think is about sustainability, is how do you sustain despite ups and downs, whether it is dealing with environmental issues, people, and money, etc. Definitely running a business requires the fact that you've got some sustainability just to be able to get up in the morning. We're going to talk about opportunities. That's one of my favorite words, and the fact that if you don't take advantage of opportunities that come your way, you're going to miss out on one of the turns in your path. So talk about sustainability of the business. So this sort of just, when I put it together, it sort of was the things that I piece together that says this is what's going on to create and sustain a business. Most importantly, as you'll hear through my talk, it's about people. You know, we all look at processes and different things that we can do, regulations, all these other things that people think they can do that are going to change things. But really, it's all about people. I am blessed with over 240 employees right now, all of which are been working pretty much since the COVID hit. And I'll share a little bit about that story. And as far as really empowering people that work with you or work as partners with you is so important. And I think that's always a true indication of a leader. Engaging, definitely if you ask any of my employees, they're always laughing with me because I'm always getting into the middle of stuff and always supporting them. And then how do you keep enhancing not only your business so that it becomes more profitable and is growing and is employing more people, et cetera, but how do you make just their everyday a little bit better? What are some of the things that you can do? So as a side note, when COVID hit us, you know, and our employees were so dedicated to come in, we were essential because we provided products to the semiconductor industry, aerospace, and definitely to the medical industry. So our employees came in and we knew that it was difficult. I mean, we had to actually have letters. I don't know in Colorado what it was like in other places, but we had to actually make sure our employees had letters on them at all times that they were driving in so that if the police pulled them over, they knew that they could still come in and work that day. We reconfigured the entire operation, made everything so that it was social distancing, that it was clean, we were temperature monitoring, everything. But that doesn't make it still feel nice, warm, and friendly. And so one of the things I heard that was going around was about hazard pay. And I thought, well, that was the most ridiculous thing I could see. Because if I was going to say that I was going to give them extra money for hazard pay, I was admitting that it was a liability and that it was a hazard where I was asking them to work. And I knew it was not. So instead, I gave thank you pay for them to come in. I also gave them every week, we still continue. Every week, every employee gets a wonderful lunch that they get to choose from local restaurants so that we support them. And then every month I give big goodie baskets with all sorts of gift cards and all sorts of fun things. And then we're able, because we have done so well, we had profit sharing and every employee gets the same check. Again, it was something that I felt was really important when I set the company up, was not to say that the leader was the one that was getting all the money. I literally get the same exact check that an operator on the line gets. And I think that's really important to make sure that you're really going to be able to sustain a business. So looking down at the other parts of the chart, clearly profitability. I mean, when you talk about sustainability and environment, they have to come together. Not only can employees and employers can do what they need to do to grow the business, but if they don't do it well, it won't survive for many reasons. So we are always looking at ways to improve. One of the programs we put in place early on was called Bright Ideas. And every employee can write up a bright idea, how to save money, how to recycle products, whatever it would be. And sometimes it's just as simple as, we need an extra microwave because it takes too long when we only have a short lunch break. So it can be anything. And then we reward, not only do we do what they're asking us to do, unless of course it really doesn't make sense, and we also make sure that they also get a chance to spin the wheel and win all sorts of prizes. So I've created a company that really has not only sustained through many ups and downs, as you'll see, but also the people have sustained. Most of my entire direct staff have been with me for over 20 years, and I have employees that have been with me for over 30. So it's pretty amazing, especially in the industry in Silicon Valley, to maintain that. So I'll go back to this Venn diagram a little bit later, and we'll talk about that. So Delphonge, you already heard a little bit about it, 240 employees. We have well over 4,000 active customers, sales worldwide. Revenue is good, 35 million, and profit is 10 million, which is, for those of anybody who's running a business, that's an amazing percentage. So those are some of my products, lots of fun things to play with. So I'm going to give you a real quick synopsis of my journey, because I got some questions from you, and I've had questions before about being an entrepreneur. Was I born an entrepreneur? I never really thought about that until I started to write these out, and I realized, well, I guess I was. So I was born in Philadelphia, coincidentally, never lived in Philadelphia. My mother was in a bar when she got pregnant. Long story. From there, we went to Arizona. Then we went to Chile, where we got shot at, literally. And we had to come back. My dad was with RCA. And we left literally the mansion, the goodies and everything in Chile. And I shared a cot with my sister at my grandma's house. And you know what? That was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I was never afraid of what could happen. What's the worst? My entire feeling as I've gone through my business journey has been, what's the worst that can happen? I end up on a cot in grandma's house. I already did that. So it wasn't that bad. We escaped back to Jersey. I got kicked out of 3rd grade. That's another story. And then we went off to Long Island. Then Dad got unemployed. Then I finally made it back to Jersey again and had a great time. And as Gillian knows, that's where all sorts of things came into play. The fact that I became mayor for the day, that I was sent to Girls State, that I had the record in discus and shot put. And like Gillian, in the years then, we founded the girls' soccer teams. So I guess at that point, I sort of knew where I was going. So my plan was, what is the worst that can happen? Not worst. And I was going to attend Northwestern University, study biomedical engineering. Then I was going to go to medical school. And most importantly, I was going to be an astronaut and fly to the moon. That was my plan. Well, that didn't work out. I flunked biology. I met Gillian. I needed a new plan. So I did a co-op at IBM. And clearly this was one of the most interesting positions I ever had. It was my first job. They asked all the people that were co-ops, hey, who here likes water? Well, you can already tell I'm not very shy. So I went, Summer, I like water, sure. Well, I ended up in the waste treatment plant. I was the first woman ever to enter the waste treatment plant. And I was given the responsibility of actually reading through all the new EPA regulations that Jimmy Carter had just passed. None of the guys that worked there wanted to deal with it at all. I'm actually not sure they could have read it anyways, but they sent me on to the capital of Vermont and I had to figure it all out. And that was my first co-op assignment. I thought it was amazing. Learning all of that has continued to be things that I relied on. My last co-op assignment, I went back and forth because the program was 5 years long. I literally had an opportunity for a new boss and I went in there, gave me an assignment and I went, oh, that's great. So this is to all the students. If you're at a job and someone gives you a project and you don't like it, you just go, thank you, that's wonderful. Of course I want to do that, but you know what? I'm going to have some extra time. So I would really like to have 2 projects. Could I have something else? What else could I do? Well, I did that. And I ended up being that there was a piece of equipment out on the semiconductor floor. And they said, we don't know how to use it. We don't know what it's for. And I went, okay, let me go figure it out. I evaluated it, figured out how to fix it and make it actually work so it would save millions of dollars for IBM. And before I even graduated, I already had a job offer at IBM. I could choose any place I wanted. Then I went back to Vermont. So I took the position, lots of exposure. I got promoted to the equipment engineering manager. Again, first woman ever. And I'll have you say that they do these surveys on a regular basis to say, how is equal opportunity going? And every year in Vermont at IBM, it would say not enough. The year I was promoted and moved into that organization, the answer was too much. So I always found that very amusing. And I actually stood up in front of 200 people, men, and going, seriously, I'm too much for you. But needless to say, it only succeeded in me being promoted again. So I also was appointed to a worldwide IBM position. But at that point, I realized this wasn't really my calling. And so I took a buyout because IBM was paying people to leave. And at age 30, I took off and ran off to California. So I became a marketing manager at Tencor and a headhunter called. So again, another point of advice for everyone. Anytime a headhunter calls, you take that call and you figure out, you will either end up with a job or you will end up helping somebody else get a job. And you always want to contact them. So I became the VP of sales and marketing at Gelpack. It was a family small owned startup. And I said, why not? We won a huge Intel contract and I fell in love with the business in 1997. And the owner didn't want to have it anymore because he hated customers and even more importantly, he hated employees. So I did what everybody does. I flew to Toronto and pitched to a private equity group and I came home with $12 million in my bank account. They actually wired it directly into my private account. Why I'm still here, I don't know, but I used it to buy the company. So what about sustainability of the business once I got it? I thought it was going to be fun, thought it was going to be easy. I knew how the business was and the customers, but then we had the crash of 2001 and my equity group went bankrupt. I had to use my own home equity to pay the payroll. And then I bought the company back. Mind you, I got $12 million from that private equity group to buy the company originally, and I bought it back from them for $150,000. And I took on and signed my name to $9 million worth of debt. I wouldn't encourage anybody to do that. Then the crash of 2008. I had learned by then that the most important thing is to share all the information with their employees. You don't want them guessing what's going on. And so despite the fact that we were doing well with still making sales, we couldn't cut it. We had to cut pay. Again, my feeling was always, you cut the pay of management first and you focus on your customers. In 2010, I kept looking for new opportunities. I bought 5 more companies. I get bored easily. And then I had to hit navigating all the USA and worldwide regulations. And we'll talk a little bit about the good news and the bad news of regulations. It doesn't make anything easier. So sustaining is hard, both business and personally. So just to give you a little glimpse into my life of ups and downs, 2017, I was diagnosed with cancer for the 3rd time. And at the same time, I was also going and trying to raise more money for the company because I was going to sell that from one private equity group to another. We had record valuation. Never would have guessed in my wildest dreams how much money and how many companies were bidding on my company. That went through. And then in August of 2019, just recently, I was diagnosed again with stage 4 metastasized melanoma. I'm still in treatment, but as Gillian will attest to, nothing has ever slowed me down, and that was not going to either. Then we got hit with sanctions and tariffs. And there's a lot of things that you'll hear out in the news, and because of business and different countries, what are all the right ways to handle these things? But there's impacts, and there's impacts to a lot of small companies. And I lost $3 million the day some of those sanctions and tariffs went through. We were also in the middle of a very large merger with an Asia operation we were ready to close, and the coronavirus hit. I flew home from China just 2 weeks before it hit the US. And of course, that deal blew up. Also cost me a lot of lawyer fees. So we focused more again on modifying our operations, ensuring our employees were safe, and we were meeting all of our customer needs. I don't know if you guys are going to ask me questions in between, but you can. Regulations, help and hurt. It's interesting. I mean, I just put together some of the list of the things and the impacts that we've had as we've gone along. And these are all the things that you have to make sure that you understand, but make sure that they also make sense and that it really fits your operation. Too much bureaucracy to any company or anybody that's working within a company can kill it. There's a lot of wasted time and a lot of dollars, and you can't compete. It's interesting, the National Association of Manufacturers, which I sit on the board, did an amazing job the last couple of years by eliminating thousands of outdated forms and to save money, which allowed all of the manufacturing companies in the United States to create more jobs and put more investment into things that they really cared about, a lot of which were on the side of green environment and how can we improve our businesses. So if it wasn't for eliminating all of that, we'd all be spending time doing paperwork instead of doing the right thing. So we're grateful to NAM and all the work that they've done. So Delphine continues to grow. My employees and suppliers are definitely the legs that sustain this company. I never forget it any day. The supply chain is so important. And when you think about sustainability, supply chains are really the thing that can ruin a company. And we came so close when so many companies have already faltered in trying to maintain a supply chain. If you don't have the right contacts, if you don't have the relationships there, you're going to have a problem. And that's clearly what's happened. And you don't have the customer base, or you can't pivot. Those are all reasons where your supply chain just starts to fall down. But you have to do the right things for the employees. And again, I stressed all the fun things that we do. But more importantly, we have to listen to our customers. We needed to understand what they needed. We needed to understand what their priorities were. We had to support our own supply chain, but we also had to reward people. We have to have the courage to make hard decisions And definitely over the years that I've run this company, there are so many hard decisions you have to make, whether it's an employment issue or whether it's manufacturing or whether it is just simply deciding whether you're going to buy another company or take on more debt, or how do you handle the fact that you now just have a faulty supply chain and you've got to get that rectified. But always believe, which is always where I'm looking at, is always believe it will all work out. See, smile. So how did Delphon sustain through all of this? Again, take advantage of opportunities, attack the challenges and the threats. And that means everything. It means every piece of the pie. I took risks and I questioned many plans. Is this really the right way to go? Is this the right thing for all of us? Is it the right time for us to make a change? Is it the right time for us to invest in this? Those are all the things that you've got to weigh to make sure that you can be sustainable. And trusting your staff is so critical. I've seen so many companies where people and just groups don't trust each other. So important. And I always take time for the people. We always work very, very hard. Everyone is committed. And when I hire people, this is absolutely true, I only tell them that I will promise them two things. You won't be bored and you'll laugh a lot. And they all agree. So how does this all fit in? Well, it really is the people plus the growth that equals the profit, which allows people to sustain. Sustainability from the standpoint of the environment, of coming up with ways to improve materials so that they're cleaner, safer, or materials that are going to be not only costing less, but actually are recyclable. So those are all things that we're always looking at. How can we improve things like that? And it can be as simple as the fact that we always had those throwaway cups, you know, for water and the throwaway cups for coffee. And we realized it was much better for us to all buy beautiful, nice mugs for every employee. So everyone had one and they didn't need those anymore. Simple things like that really can make a difference. So the people, as you can see there, is what is so important. The social variable dealing with the community, education, the social resources, and the businesses. And it's really, how do you combine that with the planet and making sure that we're all still going to have a planet for our kids and our grandkids. I have 4 grandkids and another one on the way, so I actually care. And how viable are these things? And how much is it going to cost to do some of the things you really want to do? And what is the return on that? And how can we continue to drive to improve that? And how can we continue to invest and support the community? One of the things that we set up, as was mentioned earlier, is a foundation for Delphon, and any employee can apply for it and say, hey, a good example was several years ago, there was a fire. God knows we've been through fires recently, both in Oregon and California. And lots of the homes were destroyed, and an employee reached out and said, hey, none of the kids have backpacks or school supplies. The school is still there, but they don't have anything. And I'm like, great. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll buy all the backpacks and all the supplies if you agree to put all the stuff together and get it out there. So those are some of the things that we do to constantly make sure that our employees are engaged with things more than just work. So this is that's sort of the end of the opening thing. You guys can ask lots of questions. I did say that I'm going to give you guys a challenge though that's out, because bioplastics is the biggest problem. It's not a problem, it's something we need to solve, where it can truly break down and that can be used still in manufacturing commercial processes. And if you don't know, there is still the Starbucks challenge for $1 million. If you can figure out something that's can completely break down and hold hot drinks. So there you go. You guys got a chance to get $1 million. So I can answer some of these questions, or we can start to make it live. Or I'll just show you more slides.
Amna, you go for it.
We do have a few questions. So all my questions were based on your journey as a woman, and then the student who asked this question that you have on the slide right now, she was the first one to post a very technical question in the chat. So Carmen, why don't you go ahead and ask your question directly? I hope she can hear me.
And also, as you ask questions, if you don't mind turning on your video so Jeannie can see you, if you have the ability to do that. I know some people are on iPhones and so forth. And when you introduce yourself, either way, please make sure you mention which institution you are from.
Okay. Hi, I'm Carmen Villalba. I'm from Colorado College. And so when you were mentioning your idea, or not idea, but your practice, I guess, of profit sharing, I really appreciated that, I guess, because something I care a lot about is large corporations, like them making at the top making so much money, but then at the bottom making literally pennies. And so obviously that's a lot bigger scale, but still like the same spirit. Like, how do you think that larger companies and corporations could implement the spirit of profit sharing, even if it wasn't every like of their hundreds of thousands of employees making the same amount? But how could that spirit of profit sharing like translate, and what would the implications be for company heads, the workers, and customers?
Great questions. You know, it's so much of it is a cultural thing. So I think that's always one of the things that people bump up against. I really think that leaders have got to show, and as I talked about, is that when we got hit with big downturns, the first thing I said to all of my staff and all the senior people is, we're all cutting our pay 50%. The next level down, you know, they'll cut their pay, you know, 30%. But as far as the employees go, they're not getting their pay cut. You know, manufacturing on the line, we need those people still. So you have to cut from there, and you've got to feel comfortable about that, knowing that if the company thrives, you as a senior manager is going to get a benefit of it. So I really think it's just a perspective. I'm always surprised when I find out that, you know, CEOs are not the first person to stand up and say, I'm taking half of my pay. Of course, my husband sometimes doesn't like that I do that, but definitely it really is, how do you assure that internally it's treated fairly too, right? So when we did that, we started to talk about how we would come up with profit sharing, and we set a goal. And every quarter, if we exceed our goal, we have a calculation, and that much money goes in the bucket. And then every employee, you'd get, if you have 240 employees, you take that bucket and you divide it by 240. So it's pretty simple, and I'm always surprised when I hear people don't do that, because even if let's say it wasn't that big of a profit share that quarter, even if you got $20, you'd be like, oh, we all got 20, great. So I think that it really is a mindset. When you get into large corporate, you know, organizations, unfortunately, you're dealing with the fact that they've got large boards, you know, how much money are we going to be giving to these employees versus that. I do think there should be definitely boards, I think, have to engage better on how to control compensation to senior management. Mostly large public boards I'm talking about. My board, unfortunately, they haven't given me a raise in 3 years, but that's another story. But again, I think it's really what the perspective is. I think there's lots of ways that you can do things equitably across all of your employees if you just really look at it.
Thank you.
So I have a relevant question there. When you're talking about having an equitable distribution in your for all your employees, what is the gender distribution for your employees? Like in your senior management, do you actively make sure that you have equal number of men and women? How does that work?
Yeah, it's actually, as a woman-owned business too, you know, you do look at that, and there's various awards and stuff. You have to show them what percentage is. I'm always surprised because I'm like, I don't know, I don't go around counting, but we're probably close to 50. I think the last number I saw is 58% women make up the company. And so, and my senior staff, I have my director of R&D is a woman, and Jeanne, my director of marketing is a woman. So we've got, even within our small senior staff, you know, we've got 3 of us against 3 of them. No, but I think that, you know, as far as diversity goes, you know, being in manufacturing, it's interesting. We struggle sometimes because we're like, well, we have a large group of Hispanic, large group of Asian, white, but definitely the Black community, we've reached out and we've tried to get more people involved in the manufacturing. We just don't see the applications coming in certain areas. You know, we try to do everything we can to be as diversified as possible. And then it really depends on where you're living and where our operations are and what goes on there. But I think if people are cognizant of it, but you're still looking at what are the skill sets that you're looking for. So you do need to always balance that.
Thank you. The second question that we have is from Emily, and it's also related to the upper management. Emily, would you go ahead and ask your question?
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm at Colorado State University. And my question was, as an upper level employee, how would you recommend communicating to upper management and other companies the importance of sustainability to get wide-scale corporate buy-in?
Well, I mean, there's some companies out there that have really done amazing jobs. Actually, Saint-Gobain, if you're familiar with them, they've got probably just one of the better systems throughout the world that I've seen, just because I know it. They actually coincidentally were looking at buying my company. I'm bummed I didn't take that offer. But from the standpoint of how do you make sure that people are looking at the sustainability, that word doesn't sometimes fit, right? So you have to figure out what are you really trying to take a look at, which is why we implemented Bright Ideas, which is a cost savings thing. How can we save costs? How can we improve, what the green environment? What could we institute there? So we sort of have initiatives, and then they know that they can write those things in, and then we're like, okay, great idea. So that's, you try to make it simple, especially when it's a very large corporation, or even small like ours. How do they communicate? How do the employees get to have their say to say, hey, can we do this? So I think you're starting to see some new positions that sit on some of the boards that, are very positive. Interesting enough, for anybody who doesn't know, California, I think, is the first state that passed the law just a couple months ago, a month ago, saying that every corporate board in California has to have a woman on the board. So that's exciting. And I'm actually working on my bio to get onto a corporate board also. So I think things like that, just simple initiatives, just say, come on guys, really, get at least one woman on board, or at least, two, diverse nationalities. Can we get something here? So I do think things are starting to at least get the support of the government and things like that. So, but it is about reaching out. Not being afraid of speaking up. Definitely, my journeys through IBM was very interesting. I mean, I ended up having an amazing career, but it was not normal. I mean, it was just, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go do this, I'm gonna do that. And so it was very great that I volunteered, actually, because my department, when I first started, there were a bunch of literally old white guys. And so they did not want to go present to the plant manager. And I'm like, well, I'll do it. I had no idea. I go walking in there, God honest truth. So I go sit down at the table. Here's the plant manager, all these senior people. I am in my 20s. And the plant manager comes walking in and he goes, oh, great. Here, can you go make copies of all these things for me? And I went, sure I can. Do you not know how to run a copy machine? And he's like, well, I said, come on, I'll show you. Come here. Well, he was for years, he would pass me in the hall and he would tease. He goes, she taught me how to run a copier, So I think we have to learn how to do it, but not in a way where it's feeling like we're confronting also both ways, right? I've never taken offense. They used to always just say, hey, you're sweetie, come here, honey. And I would be like, oh, come on over here, love of my life, river of joy, come on over here. So I never took it to heart to say that there was anything there. Everybody was brought up differently. We all had different backgrounds. We all had different parents. We all had different aunts and uncles that said things and did things. And I think we all just have to go, hey, I don't know. I was brought up one way in my house and they were brought up a different way, but I'm not going to take offense to it. So I think part of my success has always been able to sort of laugh at just about anything. Just go, you kidding me? Come on, I'll make copies. Let's go.
That was really cool, Jeannie. That's something that I needed to hear. So with that, I would like to have Orla's perspective on what Jeannie has shared. Is she still here? I don't see her on my screen. We had two guests.
Yeah, Orla's still here, and she actually has her hand raised. So Orla, would love to hear from you.
Okay. Well, I've been going to respond to that question, but I will just a few comments to Jeannie. Just thank you very much. It's so clear from your energy and your passion, why you've ended up where you have. And I know from running my own business, I would say to anyone, if you want a real development, run your own business, because it's one of the most facing things, because what you do and don't do kind of there's no buffer. It happens straight away. Yeah. So fantastic. And it was also really great to see your passion for people and your values coming through. So yeah, and it's something that I really notice as I've been working with businesses on the sustainability front, is that it's very much led by individuals' values, really. So it's more challenging on the corporate front, just to go back to that question around how do you actually persuade a large corporate to take on sustainability from an environmental perspective, you know, so a pro-social, pro-environmental perspective. So I think, you know, a few things I would just say from the experience of other companies, but I'd say more so here in Europe as well. I think there is a difference, I think, between, you know, the take up on the SDG front, I think Europe-wise versus the States, just from what I can take out. So I think a few things that you know, some of the businesses have shared with me about that challenge, about trying to convince their stakeholder board to actually make that change. So you know, it's curious, but whilst we would hope it can be values led, it's very much making the case for it, as in the case of how it will benefit the business. And there's a lot more studies coming out to actually show that it is actually beneficial for the business, profit-wise, to actually focus on sustainability. So, but it is a case of really trying to articulate that case in a way that your board can get it. That's the first step. Now, obviously, where we'd like to get to in terms of a future vision is where, you know, certainly what we're trying to advocate here is that every business runs from a pro-environmental, pro-social front. So like your lovely Venn diagram of people, prosperity, and planet. And to kind of say that this is actually the new standard for business, you know, to put that forward. So, you know, in a way, Jeanne, you're kind of leading leading the way there, because that's what we're trying to get to, you know. So I think my question to you is, you know, again, just to say, how would you, you know, going forward, if you had a future vision for how businesses at the large corporate end and wherever, and you also mentioned the supply chain, because your supply chain can be also, you know, something within your control that you can actually start to influence from an environmental policy side. You can start to give them, you know, in your agreements, what you will and won't have as a company. So yeah, any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think that one of the things that we started to realize, especially on the supply chain front, is that it's too often that you don't actually go, and now of course with COVID, we're all dealing with a different world, but was, you know, really going to see the operation. I mean, the fact that I grew up in manufacturing, and I love manufacturing anyways, an amazing VP of ops and a good guy that heads all of safety, which also gets under all the green initiatives too, is that, you know, we have literally a supplier card, a report card that we send out to all of our suppliers every year. I think we actually do it twice a year. And it's everything from, you know, how is their service, the quality of their products, you know, what have we seen that they do. A lot of times it's two ways, because they also want to know what we're doing, right? So if they're making a part of a material or product that I use, they want to know where it goes. So we do have a lot of surveys, especially for like big companies. Boston Scientific is a big one of ours, Johnson & Johnson, some of the big medical ones. We go through huge lists and they want to know what we're doing. So they're caring, because they're asking about, you know, how do we maintain the safety of our employees? How do we, you know, what are we doing with waste, you know, products? How do we, you know, maintain this? Well, how do we clean this? Or do we use abatement systems for the IPA that we used through some of our processes? So they'd want to know about that also. So I think it is a two-way street, and it should continue to be a two-way. So both suppliers asking their customer and the customer asking the suppliers. And then it really is a whole situation of understanding the costs of some of these things. And that's really where some things fall apart. And I would say that there's a lot of companies out there that are starting to improve, meaning companies that make better systems to make us more sustainable. So in other words, the abatement system I'm talking about is a way of cleaning out all of the fumes that would be coming out of some of these. How do you do that? Well, some of those are just, they're actually probably more than that company makes. So how can they do that? But there's got to be ways of coming up with ones that are smaller or more efficient, or just ways to make steps. And I think sometimes, you know, we all look at it and we want to like solve it all at once and just throw the big stuff at it. Well, it's not feasible all the time. There's a lot of little steps we got to take.
Thank you, Jeanne. Yeah, the incremental approach as opposed to the big radical change. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes when initiatives come in, that's what happens too. People are just like, I don't even understand this. Or you get the government information that we get, and it's 20 pages long, and we're all like falling asleep by page 3. So you're like, what do we have to do? What's changed? Are we okay or aren't we? We have those kind of conversations.
Thank you. And I'm just conscious of, there's a range of questions there.
Sure.
That I think we're on that environmental, product consumption side that
Sure.
kind of relate to that.
And Orla, so I just have one quick thing to say very quickly. Jeanne, could you, if you don't need the slides anymore, do you think you could stop sharing so everybody can have a gallery view?
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, as Orla said, we do have some questions. Chris, why don't you go ahead and ask your question? He has a very complicated question. I was trying to understand what he said.
Should I take notes, man?
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, let's try to go over this question here. So it's in regards to the conflicts and minerals reporting. So my question is kind of two parts, I guess. The first being, why do you think this is left to the company level? And should it maybe be better suited by, World Trade Organization, or maybe another organization that maybe even needs to get made? Maybe kind of one of these international bodies being able to give a better overview and purview of this. And then part 2 of the question being, while like CMRT is required, I think both Tesla and GM, and I'm sure it's a lot of companies, they had recent shareholder proposals that got turned down that were gonna enforce human rights even more, or put those into their metrics more. So I wonder if you could make a comment on that as well.
Yeah, on the conflict minerals. The two things that happens there is traceability is the biggest issue, so when all of a sudden we're getting a report, a request from a customer that wants to prove that we haven't gotten the materials, you do your best, but you can't. You're absolutely right. We're not experts at that. I don't even know where I would reach to, to find out. There is no good government agency that can even explain what they're looking for. So I do think it doesn't belong down to that level. It needs to be, again, if most of these minerals are coming from obviously outside of the US or outside of Germany or outside of whatever that, so it really should be the government that's monitoring what's crossing the border versus the person that didn't even know that probably went through 6 hands before it ever got to me. So I don't know, how do I know that one's that or that? We literally have to go back to suppliers. What we do is we have a little on a sheet. They sign off saying, no, we do not use any conflict minerals. Okay. What am I supposed to do about that? So I do think it's got to be something that if we're going to really try to, support, human rights and some of the things that go on related to the conflict minerals, we've got to do different ways. The other thing is, people are working to find alternatives, so I think that's also a way to go about it. I don't know if I've answered you completely.
It did, yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we do have a lot of questions still in the chat box, but just so everybody knows, we have 10 more minutes till we go into the breakout rooms. So Victoria, you're up next, and then I will have to skip over Dr. Green, and then I will get answers from Jeanne later on and focus on student questions for the rest of the time that we have.
And I can send you the answers I wrote from the ones you sent me before too.
Yes, okay, thank you. So Victoria, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Hello, my name is Victoria. I'm a student at Colorado College, and my question is, how does Dolphin's environmental policies compare to the policies of your guys' competitors?
Well, our main competitors actually probably wouldn't be doing anything that I do. because most of my competitors right now are copycats in Asia, in China. So that's what I battle, is more of those. And again, that's where, you know, some of the tariffs and things really hurt us, because for us to get our product in there, they just put a price that's so much lower and I have to pay the tariffs and the duties. So most of it is competition that is outside of the US. Currently, I don't believe there's anybody in the US that I'm aware of where they actually makes the same products that we do. So I think, again, it sort of depends on how you can monitor that, I guess, would be the question. I'd be, how do I compare it? I would say that there's companies, because I've bought so many companies, I've spent a lot of time going into companies in the United States, I can tell probably within the first 20 minutes whether I'm going to buy that company or not. And it's all about the culture, the way that people are looking and feeling, and you can tell if they're not feeling comfortable there. You can tell if employees are like, okay, I don't really like, you know, putting my hands over in this stuff, you know, or what, it's not a protective hood, or you don't have garments on them or gloves on them. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, I ain't buying that company, you know. So I think that those are the things that you can look at to say, are they caring, just fundamentally, basically caring about the safety and the welfare of their employees.
When you say that there are copycat companies in Asia and other parts of the world, aren't there any international regulations saying that you cannot be copycats?
Unfortunately not, because it's very expensive. So some of it's hindsight, you know, 20 years ago when I did this, should I have spent the extra money patenting in every country, right? I have patents that are in the United States, but that doesn't protect me at all in any other country. So vice versa, if Germany has a patent, that doesn't protect us if they're there. So it's, and unfortunately, you know, China is the king of copycats, and they do a great job. I mean, so I've spent a fair amount of time in China, and, you know, I always want to get frustrated and whatnot. And then I'm always amazed. I'm like, wow, that's really impressive. I mean, we got to walk through an entire factory that's building, you know, our products, and they're selling it to one of our customers, and we lost the business. And all I could say is, you did an amazing job. I mean, I'm not going to argue with them. And they even gave, as we walked through, he even gave us some good ideas. I'm like, oh, maybe we should try that. Good idea, you know? So there's not a lot of protection. It's not a lot of protection at all.
Oh, well. So
yeah, trade actually somewhat are stronger in some ways, because you can cross over. So we have gone after companies that have tried to use Gel Pack name to sell, you know, our products, you know, their products with our name. Those are a little bit easier because it's more of a, you know, just a simple threat going through. But yeah, we end up with all sorts of things. I've gotten 2 emails from, we don't even know who these people are, Harry Hiroshi and John Smith in China, claiming I'm violating sanctions. I'm like, what? And that cost me probably $500,000 to convince the US government that I was not doing anything wrong. So there's still so many things that just make things difficult.
Huh. Oh, well. With that, I will take Zophia's questions, and then because we're close to finishing, I would like both Jeanne and Orla, thank you, both of you, for being here to give your some remarks to finish this discussion. And then whatever is left, all the questions, there are many, I would post them and email them to both of you, and then I can post your answers on Slack so everybody has them. So why don't Sophia?
Hi, my name is Sophia. I'm a student at Michigan Technological University. And I was wondering, in the R&D process at Delphon, are the environmental emissions or related byproducts to certain products evaluated and considered when thinking about whether something in R&D will continue to PD and be on your product line? And then just in general, I'm curious about how much of a pulse you have on like the related emissions to each product.
Well, we actually have to report in, so especially in the state of California. So we have to, for instance, always give what we have purchased of certain chemicals, you know, where it has been dispensed, and then how much have gone out, as in we have what we call, I forget the name of the company, but, you know, any waste products have to go in a very sealed container. We have signage. I mean, the amount of documentation, making sure that we know where any of our waste is going, we have that. But more importantly, we recognized several years ago that when we're coming up with a new product and we're saying, oh, let's use this chemistry, this looks really, really good, we weren't asking all the right questions. And one of which was, you know, do we need to protect anybody for air masks? And we realized that this is pretty toxic. So we need to make sure that we've got, you know, hoods in place, and we've got, you know, the right type of things so that they have to wear a mask so that they don't get any exposure to the chemicals. So we do really try to go through that. We do cover all the MSDSs that come in from our suppliers. We review that with them to make sure that we understand exactly what those are. And then we have to do a CFC, which is a certificate of compliance to all of our customers. So going through those steps assures that we continue to make sure that we're monitoring.
Thank you, Jeannie. And that reminded me that although I said that Zofia will be the last, but one of my students is hiding somewhere and hasn't asked a question. Where is Daniela? Because she had lots of questions about your role as a woman. Daniela, are you here? I can see her. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, hi, I'm Daniela. It wasn't about your role, so it was like I read your biography and I saw you were a lot into empowering women about science in different parts of the country. And like, can you link that with sustainability, with the SDG 12, the empowering of women?
Well, I still believe, especially I've done 2 missions to Africa, and clearly women are making it better, much more than the men are. And so I see that there. So I think that there is a link. I think the more that we can support organizations like She Can, which is an amazing organization that gets scholarships for college girls, from like Rwanda, Cambodia, you know, to top universities. And they're now going back and they're making a difference. Some of them are already high up in government that have gone back, that have gone through the She Can people. It's a great organization. So there's so many organizations out there. Obviously the ones that I support and donate to and have been to many events there and been a speaker at some of their events. Are the ones that I think we have to really support. STEM, I mean, when I judge science fairs locally, not only because I just think it's fun, but my main mission is to always go to the girls that are doing science, and I'll be like, wow, this is great. So you're going to be a chemist or a scientist? And what do you think you want to get into? And then I'm always heartbroken by the ones that go, oh, I'd like to design clothes. I'm like, no, that's not what you want. So, you know, but it's there. You support them and you get them excited about the projects that they did. So I do a lot of work with the local high schools. I don't know if I answered.
If I may just add something just on the feminine gender and sustainability front, believe it or not, there's a lot of interesting research showing that as more and more women are obviously in the workplace, but also being promoted to more senior levels, and you know, there's a lot of challenges there. But with that, there's actually something that comes with that in terms of values that allows a different kind of value system, particularly from the environmental and social consideration perspective. So there's like a number, I can maybe send it on to Gillian or to Amna, but there's some very good TED Talks where you have some female entrepreneurs talking about how they're putting their values into business and how that is making a shift. So that whole aspect of, you know, what the SDG focus on equality for women in education and moving that forward has a knock-on effect on many levels, actually. So it's something we do need to keep moving on, because I believe it has a significance in terms of what we're having to see in terms of rebalancing how we do business. For example, we do need a new value system, one that takes into account the planet as well as the people on the planet. So whatever will help do that. Yeah,
we gotta get women running.
That was good. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jeannie and Orla. We are very close to our finishing time. This was a great and a very inspirational talk. And I'm glad both of you could make it. And the amazing thing about today's talk was that we didn't just cover responsible production and consumption, we covered gender equality too, which is another SDG. So that was great. Thank you very much. And with that, I would give it over to Gillian if she wants to go ahead and say something. I hope she's here.
Yeah, no, I'm still here. we have our other class doing a scavenger hunt. That's our strategy of teaching 2 classes at the same time. So I was going to basically ask if everyone has a moment, if you could turn your video on, and let's give Jeanne and Orla a big thank you and sort of clap. This is an awesome. This is our first guest speaker dialogue, so we really appreciate the 2 of you making it, really lively, and it's better to go overtime with lots of questions. So while we still, as we close, I would encourage the students, please ask any additional questions because we saved the chat, and then Amna will send the chat to Jeanne so she can answer additional questions like on SDG 5 on women. But some of the other SDGs that, Jeanne, the students are assigned to different SDGs. Some of the good ones you might think about is good health and well-being. Jeanne talked a lot about that and the importance of that as part of the sustainability of businesses and countries. But also think about climate action. We talked a lot about, businesses being sustainable, the supply chain going back and forth. That really falls a bit under a different SDG. So think about those questions, shoot them in the chat. When we go into our breakout room, the chat box will stay live. As you remember, the chat box will stay with the main plenary. So you can continue to ask those questions and it'll be captured in the recording. So once again, thank you, Jeanne and Orla. This is great fun.
You're welcome.
Jeanne, I think we have another happy hour date coming up soon, right? We got to talk about it.
Oh, always.
Always. Hey, thanks again. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Amna, who's going to get you guys organized for your breakout rooms.
All right. Well, I have to get back to work now. So
The invitation.